Welcome back to MMA Live.
Always fired up, another gem of a montage there from our producer Zach Candido with Danik Florian McNeil with you here on MMA Live, and we are now less than 2 weeks away from the biggest gate in UFC history. 55,000 plus will be packed into the Rogers Center next weekend. From a fighter standpoint, I'm glad I'm not fighting, but what kind of impact might this have on the fighters? Essentially double the previous record for attendance.
Yeah, it's hard to say because it's unprecedented. This is a huge crowd. You have some guys in Mark Hominick who that's their hometown, so there's a lot more pressure on these fighters, and you never know. That energy in there could be a positive thing. It could be a negative thing, getting fighters too riled up, getting them nervous, or it could really propel them to victory.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the fighters react to all of this, because though they're experienced, they've been in the octagon many times, they haven't been in that kind of an environment, so It's going to be fun to see.
A lot more media, too. We hope the FMAC keeps his seat in the front row. I know that's important to you. But, Franklin, is this a precursor to seeing more of these arena-style events for the UFC, not just in North America, but abroad as well?
I think so. I think that I believe it's going to be in Canada again, but I also believe this is a precursor to possibly Dallas, and I think that that's a place it's going to be interesting to see how the Dallas people react to this.
And a lot of people, I think, who are expecting that show at Cowboy Stadium wonder, will it be configured for 55,000 plus? You can get those fans in Canada. Remains to be seen if they could get 55,000 here in the United States. Well, we're going to show you now a look at a couple of the prelims. Again, this fight is absolutely loaded top to bottom. It sort of fits the mold for what we're doing here at UFC 129. These are the two prelim bouts you will see on Spike a few weeks after his brother Nick took care of business. You got Nate Diaz against Rory McDonald, and Jake Ellenberger stepping up on short notice against Sean Pearson. These are the 6th and 7th fights on the card, Kenny. Not too bad.
Unbelievable. I'm really looking forward to that Nate Diaz and Rory McDonald fight. You know that Nate Diaz always comes to fight, but Rory McDonald is a guy I've been training a lot with recently, and he has been looking phenomenal in training. In my opinion, this kid is a future champion.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, he's talked about Rory McDonald quite a bit, and you seem to be very high on him. But Nate's tough, so
absolutely.
This is a good fight for him.
And certainly an important fight for Nate Diaz in trying to figure out sort of where he stacks up in this division.
Yeah.
All right, well, there's a decided Canadian flair to this card as well. You've got 10 Canadians total on the card, and 9 of the 12 fights will pit a Canadian against an American. Kenny, we know your last fight came in your native Boston, Massachusetts. What's it like to fight on the home turf?
There's a lot of media obligations for these fighters, and that could definitely be a burden on some of these guys. When you want to just go in there, watch your weight, train, you can't just do that. People forget about all the commitments you have as a fighter. So many media obligations. You got family and friends asking you for tickets, all these things, and then you have this huge event, 55,000 fans. It could be a lot.
Yeah, it can be, but it also can be advantageous for the guy who's coming into that environment from the United States. Some guys thrive on being booed and want to shut the crowd up. It's going to be tough for the local guys.
Yeah, and you think about it. Mark Hominick is in. This is a dream come true for these guys to be able to fight in your hometown, and even for the other guys coming from the United States, whether you're from Canada or not. This is a historic event. This is 55,000 people who came to watch you fight. Whatever happens in your career, you can go back and say that you fought on that card in Toronto.
Not unlike UFC 100, sort of has that historic feel. And of course, next week we will preview that entire main card for you. There will be plenty of fireworks in Toronto, also plenty of fireworks outside the cage these days between former teammates John Jones and Rashad Evans. You might recall at one point both declared they would never fight the other, but things have changed dramatically in a few short months. Jones becoming the youngest champion in UFC history and agreeing to fight Evans in his first title defense, so the friendship, at least for now, has been tabled, and possibly it will be for longer. In an interview with ESPN.com, Jones talking about how things went down in training, and here is the quote for you. "We fought each other in practice. A finish has been possible several times, and it has always been me finishing him. I never did it out of respect that he was the elder of the school. It's against protocol in a way. Some people would do it, but I believe in tradition." All right, now for more on this dynamic, we bring in ESPN.com MMA insider Josh Gross. All right, Josh, you wrote the story for ESPN.com that sort of began this back and forth. What was your reaction when you first heard what Jones had to say?
I wasn't so surprised in the fact that he said what he said in terms of him getting the better of the Rashad in training, although he did admit that Rashad on the ground sometimes dominated him. I was surprised that he spoke about it at all. The fact that a fighter is willing to go on record and speak about what happens in sparring, Kenny can attest to this. You don't hear that a lot from guys. It's sort of sacred ground. And the fact that he was willing to say that he had hurt Rashad to the point where he could have finished him. He said these weren't really sparring sessions. These were fights. I asked for clarification on that, but he was pretty certain in the way that he approached the particular sessions that he had with Rashad, that in fact that those were fights and that he could have finished him.
All right, we'll get Kenny's thoughts in a second, but not surprisingly, Rashad Evans took issue with Jones's commentary. We plucked a few of Rashad's rebuttals on Twitter, and among the notables, it's been on. Get off your own fan bus because nobody is driving. You ain't as raw as you believe, and I'm going to show you. That's not all. At Johnny Bones, he writes, Johnny Bones will be MMA's version of Milli Vanilli. Wait until the curtain comes down, because it will. And then I think this one is most telling. He said he is fake. The fighting is off the hook, but as a person, he is fake. All right, Franklin, you have spoken since with Rashad Evans. What do you make of this whole commentary and the back and forth?
Actually, I spoke to him more than once. And Rashad was emphatic to say that that is not true. At no point was he going to or in danger of ever being submitted by John Jones. He kind of joked about the Milli Vanilli thing. John doesn't know who Milli Vanilli is. We kind of, if we do, we're really telling our age. But Rashad, the one point is, his thing was the fans don't understand that didn't happen. And when you start saying things about him being beat up in camp, fans believe it. They don't know what the protocol is in camp.
Yeah, you know, it's definitely rare that you get a fighter going on record, as Josh mentioned, saying that you did well against a guy, or even, you know, some specifics on what took place in a sparring session or in a fight, as John was saying. So it's surprising that you would even mention, as a fighter, you don't say it to the media how you did against another guy, you know, positive or negative. It's just a weird thing that John Jones went ahead and said that, because that's something that's not very, very typical for a fighter to do.
You don't tell me a lot of that stuff off the record, and I thought we were pretty close. Josh, let's shift it, though, inside the cage for a minute. Most people have John Jones as the #1 light heavyweight out there, but he doesn't necessarily see it that way just yet.
No, he believes he'll be their #1 at some point. He believes that. In fact, he said in his heart he knows he'll be #1 someday. But right now, until he beats a Quentin Rampage Jackson, he mentioned Lyoto Machida, you know, that was what we always hear, styles make fights. And he said until he meets these guys in competition, he can't truly claim to be the #1 fighter in the world, though he fully expects to be one day.
And while he has yet to successfully defend that 205-pound title, most do expect he'll eventually ply his trade as a heavyweight. Is that going to happen anytime soon, or not so much?
Well, 2 to 3 years, maybe, you know, 2 to 3, 4 years, somewhere in that range. I think the latter, probably about 4 years. He says that he recognizes he's still growing. He's only 23. He doesn't want to have to suck down weight to make 205 pounds. So his future is at heavyweight. He called himself potentially dynamic heavyweight, someone that does stuff in the division that you don't see. He was very complimentary of Cain Velasquez. He thinks he can be that kind of heavyweight, and he expects to be one day.
Well, so far he's been nothing short of dynamic. ESPN MMA insider Josh Gross with the very latest on John Jones and Rashad Evans. Thank you, Josh. We'll catch up next week.
Thank you.
All right, other UFC news for you now. It'll be a rematch of former champions when Mauricio Shogun Rua and Forrest Griffin collide at UFC Rio. The fight confirmed for the UFC's return trip to Brazil on August 27th. Their first meeting back at UFC 76, Griffin spoiling Rua's promotional debut with an upset win by third-round submission. All right, up next, it was a wild weekend for Bellator Fighting Championships in Arizona. A non-title fight for Joe Warren ends in major controversy. We discuss when we return. This is MMA Live.